Hello and welcome to Rando Rob. Each week on Rando Rob, I'll be showing and discussing one item from my large collection of collections. New shows appear every Monday, and throughout the week, I'll be adding older episodes of Rando Rob that were previously only available to my Patreon subscribers. You can watch episodes of Rando Rob on YouTube at youtube.com/Rob O'Hara. Just look for the Rando Rob playlist. Audio versions of the show are available on my website at podcast.robohara.com or through iTunes. Just search for Rando Rob. Thanks for watching or listening, and I hope you enjoy this vintage episode of Rando Rob. Hello, welcome to another episode of Rando Rob. As my 16-bit supporters, my top-tier Patreon supporters know, this is the weekly video show that I shoot where I show off an item in my room, one random item out of hundreds or possibly thousands of collectible things I own. And every now and then I decide to share these to a slightly broader audience, and that's what I'll be doing with this week's episode, because this is kind of a special episode and it's also kind of a sad day. The picture that you see there to my left is Pat Deckard, who passed away this weekend. I'm not really sure how old Pat is, but she would have been getting close to 80. When I grew up, well, when I was born, we lived in a small house, and we moved to the house I grew up in the summer that I was 4 years old. And our next door neighbor was Pat Deckard. And as of right now, well, I can't, it's hard to say that you live next door to someone, but when they've passed away, I suppose. But my dad still lives in that same house, the house that we bought in 1978. And Pat Deckard, until this weekend, lived in that same house. So we have been neighbors with Pat Deckard since 1978. Of course, my parents got divorced, and my mom moved out to a different place, to a different house. And my sister and I moved out. And so my dad has been the only one living there. And Pat Deckard's husband passed away almost 20 years ago. And she has three sons. Her youngest son, Doug, is a year older than me, so we were friends growing up. And then there were two older brothers, but of course, all three of those, her sons have moved out. So for a long time, it's just been Pat Deckard living by herself and my dad living by himself and being next door neighbors. And I could tell you a lot of things about Pat Deckard, but this isn't just a tribute to Pat Deckard. I am going to show you an item this week, but it's an item that ties into Pat Deckard. But I thought I would just tell you a couple of quick things about Pat, just to kind of set the stage. Pat Deckard was, it's hard to say past tense, but I think she's retired over the past several years, but she was one of the busiest and most successful realtors in our area. So everybody knew Pat. Everybody had bought a house that Pat had sold, or sold their house through Pat. So a lot of people knew her that way. She was also in a bowling league for many, many, many years, and a lot of people bowled with her and against her. So a lot of people know her from bowling. And you couldn't drive through my town, Yukon, without seeing a sign for decades that would say, a house for sale, call Pat Deckard. Everybody knew Pat's number because they were always on those signs, And I would say if I don't know, eccentric kind of makes somebody sound weird. People go, well, if you're eccentric, but my wife likes to refer to certain people as the spice of life, people that just have a zest for life. And man, that was Pat for sure. She would wear these outfits, man, like these, bright colored shirts and big denim skirts and cowboy boots. And up until this last year, you'd see her out mowing her lawn or riding lawnmower and stuff like that, and just always out working working on the yard, doing stuff. She had this really loud laugh. It sounded kind of like Phyllis Diller. That's what my wife described it as. And she loved the word awesome. Oh, Robbie, that is awesome. She would say to me. Anyway, she was also a collector of stuff. And it's funny when you're a kid, when you're a kid, you don't really have a relationship with adults. You're just a kid, you know? But when I got older, you know, I mean, when I was a kid, Pat Deckard was like the neighborhood mom. The Deckards, they had a garage, a separate garage from their house, and they had all these mattresses back there and portable electric heaters, and so we would have slumber parties at the Deckards, and we would stay out in the back garage. That was our thing, you know. And then in the morning, we would all come in the house, and Pat Deckard would always cook everybody French toast. That was one of her specialties. She would make French toast. And I had never had French toast before. The first time I ever had it was next door that Pat had made, you know. And also, when she made frozen pizzas for her kids, and then, of course, we would have frozen pizzas just hanging out over there. She would always, when the pizza came out of the oven, she would take lemon juice and fill the cap with lemon juice and sprinkle it on the pizza, and it gives it this great taste. And I didn't know why she did that. I remember that Doug did that, and I finally asked him. I was like, "Why did you do that?" He goes, "I don't know. My mom made it that way." And I sent her a message on Facebook. I was like, "Why did you make it?" She goes, "I don't know." She got it from somebody else. But to this day, in my fridge, there is a bottle of lemon juice, and the only use that it gets is for frozen pizzas. Every time I make a frozen pizza, I put lemon juice on it, and every time I do that, I'm going to think of Pat. And every time I do that, I do think of Pat. But yeah, so, you know, I mean, you know, when it's your next door neighbor and you go over there a lot, you know, you hang out and you see that person. But, you know, when you're a kid, it's just someone else's mom, you know. But when you get older, you actually build a relationship. Like I built a relationship with Pat Deckard. Pat Deckard was a friend, you know. And she was a huge collector of stuff. She had a huge collection of Native American antiques. I remember she had this like a papoose that you would carry a baby in her living room. She had glass display things in her living room. She had, you know, like different types of Native American clothing with beads and stuff on it. And snowshoes that were hanging in her living room. And it was all like authentic stuff. You know, it was old Native American stuff that she'd picked up over time. And then she had the back garage, which after the kids moved out kind of became a storage area. And then she built another building back there, and it was also a storage area back there. And so anyway, she knew that I love Star Wars. I mean, I was the kid in the neighborhood that loved Star Wars. In the late 70s, everybody loved Star Wars. You know what I mean? Just everybody was into Star Wars. But other kids let it go, and I didn't for a long time, and I still like Star Wars, you know. And I remember one time in the late 90s, she called me or got a hold of me or something, and she said she needed help with her computer. She was trying to do something on her computer, and she was trying to start being able to do realty from home and log in or do something like that, or set up her email. And I think it has something to do with the email. And I said, sure, I'll stop by, Pat. And so I stopped by her house, and looked at her computer, and the whole monitor was filled with icons. And the icons were for every website that she visited. And she was using AOL at the time. And so I don't think she didn't understand that you could connect to the internet and then go to different web pages. So like if you wanted to go to Google, she would double click the Google icon on her desktop, and then AOL would dial up, and she would put in her username and password, and she would do whatever in Google, and then she would hang up. And then if she wanted to check her email, she had another icon for email. She would double click, and AOL would dial up, and she would put in her username. And I remember trying to explain to her, I was like, once you're connected, you can go to all these things. You don't have to hang up in between websites. But that's what she had done. She had literally hundreds of icons on her computer screen for every website, and she was dialing up to go to every website. But she told me that if I came over, that she also had something for me. And I was like, oh, Pat, you don't have to get me anything. She said, no, it was something that she had picked up along the way. And I said, okay. So I went over and I helped her with her computer. And then she was like, I got these things back in the back garage. And so we went back there. And I hadn't been in there since I was a little kid, but I mean, it was like full of stuff now, very organized. But she had some antique mall booths around town where she had different things or whatever. And she said she had found these glasses for me, and she'd pulled them out of the booth and saved them for me. And so if you're a collector of Star Wars stuff, or if you just grew up in the 80s, I'm sure you'll recognize these. These are, I think they're all for Burger King. I have to take a look here, but they're all Burger King Coca-Cola glasses. And I don't remember which ones, because I've tried to fill in the rest of the collection, so I don't remember which specific ones, but I'm sure this was one because I have a duplicate of it. But she had pulled these glasses out and saved them, and was like, Robbie, I just know that you love Star Wars, and that's awesome. And I just wanted you to have these. And so she gave me those glasses. She also gave me, and I don't have them right here. I do have them. They're just in storage in the garage. But she gave me, I think they were made by Dixie cups or something, but they're like the little tiny paper Star Wars cups. And I remember seeing them. My dentist had them where you could take them, and they were the kind of cups you would pull and then drink water and spit or whatever, but they were the little small ones. And she had sleeves of those, and she gave those to me. And I had not seen those since I was a little kid. And so that was super cool. One thing about Pat Deckard is she knew everybody, so if there was something going on, man, that was a good source of information. I remember one time she called me and she said, Robbie, I know you you have those arcade games. And I did, and she said, there is an estate sale on Friday, and there's going to be 2 arcade games there. And I was like, wow, I didn't see that in the paper. I didn't see it anywhere or whatever. She said, well, they're going to be there. And I went. And I don't remember, there were 3 games there, and one was Centipede, a beautiful Centipede cabinet. I mean, the side art was perfect. I mean, it worked perfect. And the second one was a Miss Pac-Man machine, which looked pretty good, and it was working. And the third one was Shinobi inside a beat up Donkey Kong cabinet. Now, I had a spare Nintendo cabinet, so I didn't need the cabinet, and I owned 2 Shinobis at the time. And so this estate sale turned out to be an auction. And I think, if I remember right, I got the Miss Pac-Man for around 100, something like that. I think I had to do a little work to it, but it worked, I don't remember, but And the centipede, I know, was 100, and that thing looked beautiful. I didn't do anything to it. And then the auctioneer kept trying to get me to buy the third one, and I was like, nah, I don't need it. And he was like, well, you got the other two. You got a truck here, And I was like, nah, And I left the third one, and I think somebody else did buy the third one, but I was like, yeah, I wasn't really in the business of flipping stuff, or anything like that. So I was glad somebody else got it, But yeah, Pat knew what you were into, If she knew there was a Star Wars thing for sale somewhere or a arcade game, man, she would. I think one time she actually bought a Atari or something at a garage sale and kept it at her house and told me to come by and pick it up, And speaking of garage sales, right after we moved to the neighborhood that I grew up in, which was called Sun Valley, I don't remember, it must have been the first year, but they had this thing called Garage Sale Day. Now, lots of places now have neighborhood garage sales, but this was not common back then. And it was a good way for her to drum up business because she was a realtor. So she would have houses or property for sale in the neighborhood, and they would have garage sale day, and you would have hundreds and hundreds of people because, like I said, it was not a common thing back then, And she organized a neighborhood garage sale day. And so every year, on garage sale day, it was always in April, and you would get up and garage sales would start. Now, the thing was, if you lived in the neighborhood, you knew that all the garage sales would be open to the people in the neighborhood on Friday, and you could go around and stuff. But, for public, it would open Saturday morning, and man, the neighborhood would get so crowded you couldn't drive down the street. There'd be people parked on either side of the road and one car able to get through, and then you'd have a car coming this way. There's no way to do it. I mean, there were times where you couldn't get out of the neighborhood. You literally could not get down our street. And there's only one entrance, one side where there's entrances. And so and we lived on the opposite side. So there were times where we were trapped in the neighborhood on garage sale day. It was such a big deal. And it was Pat Deckard's doing. And the most fun was, in later years, 5 or 10 years ago, let's say 10 years ago, going back to garage sale day. Now, and I should say this, unless I was out of town for work or when I lived in Washington, I have been to every garage sale day. I've been going to garage sale day my entire life. For 40 years, every year I go to garage sale day. And, for a long time, it was like a neighborhood reunion. You'd walk down the street and be like, oh, yeah, there's so-and-so and there's that, and you'd stop and they'd say, oh my gosh, and you'd say, yeah, here's my kids now, and it was a really fun thing to do. And if you get old enough and you don't move away, I mean, I have moved away and I've moved back, and I live 10 minutes from the house that I grew up in. My dad still lives in the house I grew up in. And now when you go through the neighborhood, literally it's like that's the house where the Coates used to live, and then the lady that lives next door, she still lives there. And then you go, yep, that used to be so-and-so's house, that used to be so-and-so's house, and every house becomes a house where people you used to know live, and they've turned over multiple times. So it's not like when you go to those people's house, you go, oh, I know the Holcombs. They used to live here, and they just look at you and they're like, no, we've lived here 5 years and we bought it, and they don't know the people. And so, that happens. But the thing was that you would still run into the people that used to live there that were coming for the garage sales. So every year we would run into Pat Deckard, and, we would, my dad has a golf cart and I have a golf cart. So sometimes we'd take my golf cart over, we'd be driving around and we'd stop and see Pat. And, if she saw something out there at a garage sale, she'd tell me, oh, Robbie, there's a guy that's got some video game stuff down there. I go, okay, thanks, Pat, And so she was always looking out, for us, for all the kids. And so, yeah, it's, it's a natural part of life. And I just, there's a lot of adults when you're a kid that you're like, oh, I have good memories, but man, there was that one time where I did something and they got really upset, or they yelled at me or something. And I don't have a single memory like that of Pat Deckard. I don't remember her ever yelling at me. I don't remember her ever getting mad at me, I will tell you one other funny story. So I think since we moved back from Washington, we've bought and sold 4 houses, I think. Yeah, I think this is our 4th house since we moved back in 20-something years. And I think Pat, except for this one, I think Pat has helped us buy and or sell or both all of those houses. And one of the things Pat Deckard does is she gets those small miniature pumpkins. And if you have ever been a customer of hers, she would paint a face on the pumpkin for Halloween, and she would drive by at some point and leave it on top of your mailbox. Or at your curb, or on your front porch or something like that. But so I've been getting pumpkins from her since 1996, and I think at some point, like, she enlisted like the help of her grandkids and stuff. I mean, she has to put out hundreds and hundreds of these things all over town, and whenever people see them, they're like, "Oh, that's a Pat Deckard pumpkin," But anyway. A couple of houses ago. So this has been a long time ago. In fact, this is the house we bought right after Mason was born, and Mason is 18. So that's how long ago this is. Pat helped us buy this house, and the short version is that the people that owned the house before us that were selling the house were going through apparently a not friendly divorce. And so a judge, I know that the woman had a restraining order against the man, and a judge had basically, the way I understand the story is that a judge had basically told them that they had to sell the house. Like, neither one could stay in the house. They had to sell the house. And neither one of them wanted to sell the house. I think they both wanted to keep the house. So we didn't know any of that when we came in to buy the house, of course, and it wasn't my deal. But it became a really contested purchase. And we were supposed to close on the house on a Friday. And because the husband and wife that were selling the house, they both had to sign the title, but they couldn't be in the loan company or the title company at the same time because legally they couldn't be in the same place at the same time. So the man showed up to sign the title first, and then we were going to come in behind him. But instead, what he did was take the title and leave, which stopped the entire sale. So then when we went in, the people at the title company were like, we can't sell you the house because the guy physically took the title and walked out. He stormed out. And so anyway, at some point, cooler heads prevailed over the weekend, but there were rumors or concerns that the purchase might not go smoothly. And so the signing got moved to the following Monday. And when we showed up, we told Pat we would meet her there. And my dad said I would not go to that unarmed. And I'm like, well, I don't own a gun. I didn't at that time. And my dad said, I do. And I will be there. And, legally he could carry a gun. So he showed up with, and not like pointing it at people, but he showed up, with a gun. And Pat Deckard brought one of her sons, who was also armed. And the lady that was selling the house showed up, and she was armed. And everyone was worried about the man who had stolen the title showing up and something happening. And then, so while we're waiting, and then the man came, but he was sitting in the car, And at some point, I don't know, but at some point the police were called. And the police came out and everybody's trying to explain the situation. And I remember this police officer basically saying, okay, listen, I need everybody with guns to go here and everybody without guns to go here. And he split up this whole parking lot of people. So people with guns went to one side and people without guns went to the other side. Fortunately, we were able to purchase the house. And there was no other real drama. But Pat had been through so much. So many crazy things for doing realty for so long that she was like, don't worry about it. It'll be okay. I mean, she calmed us down. Oh, this, he can't hold this up forever. And I want to get you guys in this house and all this stuff. And so she was kind of the peacemaker. She wasn't, I'd say she's the peacemaker, but she was also the deal maker. You know what I mean? Like, she was like, no, this is how it's going to happen. You're going to do this. You're going to do this. And just made it happen. So, I know that I know of at least one or maybe two booths in antique malls that Pat owns. We haven't got to go to antique malls over the past several months. Even when you go, it's just no fun walking around with a mask and worrying about other things and stuff. So we haven't been. I know she's got a ton of stuff in antique stuff. I know she's got a ton of stuff in storage, and I always think about that. I think, well, someday something will happen to me and somebody will have to decide which of these things around me, which ones were important, which ones were just stuff, and when you pick up the things, you don't know the stories, so someday somebody will come in and they'll be like, oh, I know Rom and I know he liked Star Wars and he had these glasses, but they won't know the real story, which was that Pat Deckard found several of these glasses and a few other things and set them aside and called me and said, hey, I was thinking of you. So anyway, that's this week's Rando Rob. Thank you guys for all your support. Sometimes it's financial support. And sometimes it's other kinds of support.